doesn't matter if you win or lose, it's how you play the game. That's a real second place attitude right there, right? So it's after Super Bowl, so now I can talk about other sports without sounding unpatriotic. So the Olympics, right? The Winter Olympics are on right now. It's one of my favorite. I'm not a huge sports fan. I'm a huge sports fan. I don't have a lot of time to watch a lot of sports. And so I typically just watch a couple games from each sport a year. But when Olympics comes around, I kind of clear my calendar, and that is what I'm doing with all my late nights. And there's just a lot of fun, different, interesting events. One of the cool ones I enjoy is the speed skating, right? To see how fast these men and women go around a track. And to go back a few Olympics, to the Salt Lake Olympics 2002, there was this major upset in one of the races. And for those who don't know speed skating, that's the one where they wear the speed suits. They look like Frozone from The Incredibles, and they have swords strapped to their feet, and they're just going so fast. It's impressive. They're cruising at like 30 miles an hour. I saw some speeds yesterday of like 36, 37 miles. I mean, it's just insane to do that on a pair of ice skates. So U.S. dominates in Summer Olympics, but Winter Olympics, we tend to struggle a little bit more. And 2002 was exciting because we had a racer. He was actually from here, Apolo Ono. You might have remembered this. And he was on track to just kind of win everything. He wound up going on to be the most decorated Winter Olympian from the United States. I think still to this date, he might still be that person. But in the 1,000-meter race, he was racing. Everyone expected him to win. He was dominating. He was all the way through the 8 laps. They're in the final laps, and this racer from China attempts to overtake him. And it's really aggressive. It wasn't maybe planned as well as it should have been. He starts slipping, and just like a set of dominoes, they go down. But actually, he was kind of like third place, and he knocks everybody in front of him down. So there's kind of this grab and hold thing as they go down one after another, and an arm catches Apollo. They all go sliding into the wall. Here's a picture of that right there. That's the front group right there. Now, you notice there's a guy in the turn. He almost looks like one of the refs because he's so far behind everybody else. That guy's name is Stephen Bradbury. He's from Australia, and he'd been about 1/8 of a lap behind the rest of the group. He started on the outside, and really, for being an Olympic event, he looked like his strategy was have a good time and be safe. Right? They really did. Like this other group, they look like they're fighting for every inch, and he just looks like he's giving them their space, and he's just having a good time, and he's happy to be there. This might be because a few years before, he had taken a skate across a thigh, 111 stitches, and 18 months of recovery. So maybe it was that. Maybe it's because in training, he slid into one of the walls going really fast and broke his back. And the doctor said, you're probably never going to skate again. And here he is in the Olympics. But you could see he's just, doing a good job and having a great attitude back there. And then this crash happens, which opens up. This is the final lap. And just off the screen here is the finish line. This is slide number 2, gives us the finish line. Yep, there he is. He's just kind of just chill. That's Apolo Ono going, oh no, and he's like dashing forward. He got silver, believe it or not. He became Australia's first ever Winter Olympic champion, not only for Australia, for the entire Southern Hemisphere, right? The very first champion from the Southern Hemisphere. Very quickly into Australian lexicon, the phrase doing a Bradbury entered. It was the epitome of an unlikely success against all odds. This morning, we're continuing the Gospel Sustained series, and I want to look to answer a couple primary questions, kind of from the title of the series, right? The Gospel Sustained. How do we sustain God's work in our life all the way to the end, all the way to the finish line? And what causes some people to finish and others to crash out before the finish line? Today, we're going to start in Numbers 13. It's not how you win or lose, it's how you play the game. How you play the game is certainly important. But for Christians, it isn't if you win or lose, because this life is not all that there is. There is something in how you finish the race, though. This morning, we're going to look at 2 characters who have similar lives, but they have very different conclusions to their story. And so I'm going to I talked last week about comparing story arcs of different Bible characters. And so we're going to compare Caleb and Gideon. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, and so this might be a train wreck by the end. It'll be like one of those things where, like, what really matters is not how you fly through the air, but do you stick the landing? And so maybe you can all hold up a scorecard at the end of if I stick the landing or not, but we're just going to go for it. And so kind of breaking the sermon in two parts. Number one is the life of the promise. This is the story of Caleb. And so the background of Caleb is he is one of the two spies, one of the two good spies. There were 12 spies total that were chosen to go into the land. And so Israel has come out, the people of Israel have come out of Egypt, and they are kind of wandering in the wilderness, and God says, okay, it's time to go spy out the land. So they choose one person from each tribe, and he is chosen from his tribe. Joshua is there also with him. They were the two that are listed as the good ones. And they go and they spy the land. They start in the north, start in the south. They go all the way to the north and back. They take 40 days and spy out the land. And so these two guys are introduced at this part in the story, and they kind of become main characters moving forward. I mean, the next a couple books of the Bible from Numbers is the book of Joshua, right? So he gets one actually named after him. And so he becomes the prominent leader with Caleb kind of as his right-hand man after Moses passes. And so the spies, they go and they spy out the land, and then they bring this report starting Numbers 13, verse 25. It says, at the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them, to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told them, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell there in the land, they're strong, and their cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. And so they brought the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we had gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people that we saw there of great heights, and we saw there the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. This report has two main parts, right? There's kind of the good and the bad, and then the bad can be subdivided. But the good report is kind of what you expected. This was the promise. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. It's an incredible place. Like, it's kind of a desert land, but there's aquifers and wells and springs just below the surface. So when you bring that water up and you irrigate, you can plant the desert there. It's a really cool place. They had brought a cutting of fruit that had really large grapes. And so they're showing them, look, this is the actual fruit from the land. So the good report was, hey, it is as advertised, it's good. But there's a lot of bad. They say, look, the people are strong and their cities are fortified. They reference this group called the Anakim, the sons of Anak. This is the bad report of, hey, we're going up against a really strong, powerful, fortified enemy. And then they get into the unrealistic part of this. We saw the Nephilim. The Anakim were tall people. They were the sons of Anak. Anak just means like long neck or tall, but the Nephilim were actually different from them. The Nephilim were from Genesis 6. If you remember what happened after Genesis 6, there was this whole flood that kind of killed everybody but those on the boat. And so in their history, in their timeline, the Nephilim aren't there. There might be these large sons of Anak who are there, but the Nephilim aren't there. And so you see where they take it one level further to the metaphorical. We were like grasshoppers, right? Okay, I don't know how seriously to take anything you're saying right now if you're comparing yourself to grasshoppers. This reference to the Nephilim, this is designed to induce fear. God is saying, look, go spy out the land because you're going to take it. And these guys say, look, it's stronger than we are. They're stronger than we are. We cannot take it. And Caleb says, no, let's go. We can do this. We can do this. Let's do it. And so Israel, the people of Israel, they reject this mission that God has given them. They listen to the bad report and they're terrified. And because of this, God judges the people. This is their response to the report. 14 verse 1 says, then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" Would it not be better to go back to Egypt? Think of what they've seen. They've seen God give 10 plagues to Egypt. They've seen him take them through the Red Sea. He's seen them sustain them through the wilderness. And now they hear one bad report, and instead of going, well, God's about to surprise us. He's about to surprise us big time because this sounds scary. They say, no, we can't do this. In fact, it would have been better had we died in the desert, or if we died in Egypt, let's just go back to Egypt. And so God judges them. God says, look, you don't want to go into the land? Fine. None of you are going to go into the land. The people who had seen the wonders that God had done during their exodus out of Egypt and who were part of this grumbling party, he says, all of you are going to die in the wilderness except for Joshua and Caleb. 14:30 says, no one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. The rest would die in the desert, and it would be their children who would be the ones who would go into the land. So this is Caleb's kind of origin story. Is he's clearly a man of faith and hope in what God does. He knows, he's seen God act, and he is just confident, hey, don't look around, trust God, this will happen. That's what we're called to do. So if we fast forward 45 years, which is kind of what the story does, they've spent this extra time wandering in the wilderness. That generation has died off, and they've kind of come back into the land. So our next passage we'll look at is Joshua 14, and this is kind of Caleb's second big scene in this story. They've come into the land, and essentially God said, I'm going to give you the land, but I'm going to give it to you piece by piece. It's going to happen incrementally, not all at once, so that you're not overwhelmed. And so piece by piece, they kind of do some broad campaigns to sort of take the major areas, and now it comes time to sort of divide up the land according to inheritance, according to tribe, and then each tribe is going to kind of clear out their own area. And so this is where we pick up Caleb again in Joshua 14, starting in verse 6. This is his request to Joshua. It says, then the people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea, concerning you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again, as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he has said, these 45 years. Since that time, the Lord spoke the word to Moses while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I'm still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then for war and for going and for coming. So now, give me this whole country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim were there with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said. And Joshua blessed him and gave him Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Therefore, Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. Now the name of Hebron is formerly known as Kiriath Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim, and the land had rest from war. Caleb starts his whole speech to Joshua, his whole request, with a reminder of the promises. The promise that Moses gave him, that he would go into the land. The promise that God gave them, that God would give them this land. The promise that God would fight on their behalf. I want to look at just a couple of these promises. There's way more than I'm going to pull out here. But God promises this land to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. In fact, kind of one of the main themes of the book of Genesis is to introduce those characters and to show how does this covenant promise go from Abraham to his son, to his grandson, to all of his children later. At the end of the book of Genesis, we're brought this character named Joseph. And his whole family relocates to Egypt. It takes a lot of chapters to tell the Joseph story, but that sets up the next book, Exodus, right? How did the children of Israel get into Egypt? Well, Joseph is the answer as to how that happened. Abraham's great-great-grandchildren are promising Joseph on his deathbed to bring his bones back when they go and leave the land. Joseph is the one making them make this promise. But he's saying, look, promise me you're going to do this. And so that's the closing of Genesis, is Joseph on his deathbed kind of just grabbing his children going, tell me that you're going to do this. When you go into the land, take my bones with you. Later it's recorded in Exodus that they pick up the bones of Joseph and they take him with them. So the book of Genesis actually ends with this reminder of, okay, the book is ending in this place where you're setting up for the years of slavery under Pharaoh, but it's also setting up the reminder of the promise of you're going to go out of the land, but God is going to bring you back in and give you the land. The promise goes to Moses as well in the burning bush experience in Exodus 3. He tells him that he's going to use him to fulfill the promise to Abraham, to bring them into the land. He says this again when they're free from Pharaoh. They've gone out into the Sinai. He's up on Mount Sinai receiving not just the law, but God is establishing the Sinai covenant. And part of this covenant is a reminder, I will give you the land. I will drive these people out before you. But there's a second side of the promise. It's not just that God's going to give them the land, but that God is going to be the one fighting for them. This is what Caleb's reminding them of in verse 12. He says, so now give me this whole country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard how the Anakim were there, great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord is with me, and I shall drive them out just as the Lord said. Why is Caleb so confident? It isn't because of his might. Caleb's 85 years old. It could be that he might be slightly exaggerating his battle readiness here. I mean, it could be literal, we don't know, but I'm just assuming that this is more a statement of zeal and intent rather than of pure physical capacity. But his faith and his confidence is in God, not in his ability. He knows that God has promised again and again to be the one to fight for them. Exodus 23:28 says, I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites from before you. I don't know if you've ever tried to fight hornets. It's a losing battle. I went to help one of the widow ladies about 3 or 4 churches ago. She had this massive hornet's nest under the eave of her house, and I show up. I was in my 20s, so like how hard can it be? And she hands me a can of spray that had just about that much in it, right? And so I shake it, like, yeah, there's some in there. And as I tilt the can up, they have a straw. That's not the right word. A needle. Whatever. They have like a hose in there. And as I tilt it up, the hose is on the air side of the can. And so I give a nice big gassy cloud to a hornet's nest about yay big around. And as I'm figuring this out, the wind changes and it hits. And I obviously had to run. Now, you don't want to fight hornets is what I'm saying. But that's what God did. God said, look, I'm going to send hornets to drive them out. Deuteronomy 3:22, you shall not fear them, for it is the Lord your God who fights for you. This next one is interesting. This is Deuteronomy 9. It says, hear, O Israel, you are about to cross over the Jordan today to go into dispossessed nations greater and mightier than you, cities great and fortified up to heaven, a people great and tall, the sons of the Anakim, who you know, and of whom you heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak? Know therefore today that he who goes over before you as a consuming fire is the Lord your God. He will destroy them and subdue them before you. You shall drive them out and make them perish quickly as the Lord has promised. Here the sons of Anak get special mention in the promise of God to fight for his people. He's saying, look, I understand the report before. I know how scary this group was before. I know how this made you shake and made you turn back and question. But listen, it's not you that's going to fight them. It's me. I am going to do the fighting for you. That group specifically, I'm going to be the one to do the fighting. God is going to do it. Deuteronomy 20, verse 4, for the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you the territory. God isn't just going to fight for them, he's going to win. God's been fighting their battles all along. There's the 10 plagues in Egypt. Each of those plagues was against one of the Egyptian gods. There's the crossing of the Red Sea and the destruction of the Egyptian army. There's their first battle. We're halfway through the book of Joshua, so they've already fought at Jericho and they've watched walls fall down. There's the killing of the Amorites with hailstones where God fought on their behalf. And so there's promise after promise after promise of this land is going to be yours just as I promised Abraham. And then there's all of these promises to fight for them. And up to this point in Joshua, there's been some good evidence that God is making good on his promises. And so this leads us to his request. Verse 12, he pleads with Joshua that he can go into the hill country. The hill country is a hard country. It's kind of a scary place. It's scary because there's lots of nooks and crannies. There's lots of valleys and crags and hiding places. If you wanted to lay an ambush for somebody, this would be the best place to take over because anybody coming through, you can come out and attack them, and then you can kind of run back to your hiding spot. And if they follow you, you have the advantage because you know the way in and out. It's not hard just because of that. It's also dry. It's away from the water sources. There's not much food there. It's kind of a desert. It's difficult terrain. It's rocky. It's sandy. It's steep. It's not huge mountains, but it's just steep hills that are very, very slippery. Most importantly, as we've seen a number of times, these sons of Anak, whoever they were, however big they were there and they had fortified cities. This had everyone flustered for an entire generation. And Caleb's response at 85, let me at them. God's promises are greater than what we see, the fear that we see, the logic that we see with our eyes. God is greater than that. And if he wants this done, it will be done. And from this, we see the victory that comes out of it. There's this little town that gets mentioned, Kiriath Arba. That just means the city of Arba. Arba was the father of the Anak. It says that here he's their greatest man. Could just mean he's their founder. Could mean he's the strongest. But Caleb goes in and reclaims this city. It was the home turf of the Anakim. But more than just being their home turf, this city has a lot of significance beyond just being the headquarters for a major people group here. It's the city where Abraham settled when he came into the land. It's the place where Abraham was visited by God and where he received the promise of a son. When Sarah died, it's the place where Abraham finally bought a field, bought a cave and buried her there. It's where he was buried as well. If you wanted to go claim some old school grounds, you go back to the time of Abraham and you reclaim this city. Caleb is asking to reclaim the ground where their most honored mother and father lays to rest. He wants to claim it away from the people who were the reason why they spent all that extra time wandering in the wilderness. This raises an interesting question of who is Caleb? Caleb, in the earlier stories, he's listed as the tribe of Judah. He's the representative there. But here his dad has a little bit of a different name. His dad, he's the son of a Kenizzite. If you go back to Genesis 15, where God is promising Abraham the land, he says, look, there's all these people, and there's a whole group of ites that God mentions. And one of those ites is the Kenizzites. These are the groups that you're going to kick out of the land, and I'm going to give you the land. And here we have Caleb, the son of a Kenizzite and the son of a Judean, taking their ancestral homelands back. He's a mix. He's not of pure origin, but his heart is pure towards God. Jephunneh is listed as a Kenizzite, and they were supposed to be one of the peoples driven out, but Caleb at least is half Kenizzite. He's connected somehow. Maybe his dad is part of the mixed multitude. When the people left Egypt, it wasn't just the Hebrew children who left Egypt. It says there was a mixed multitude who went out with them, right? They had seen the powers that Yahweh had done, and they said, well, he's destroyed all of our gods. He's destroyed the son of Pharaoh, God incarnate. He must be greater. We're going to go with them. Maybe this is how they got connected. We don't really know. It doesn't tell us a lot. It just says his father's name, and it keeps hammering that point in this story. He was a Kenizzite. He was a Kenizzite. He was a Kenizzite. And this town that he takes is the town that is for them. Caleb is granted this request to trust God's promises to take the land, and he's able to win his ancestral lands back, so to speak. Here we see where Canaanites are not entirely excluded from the promises of God. We could also look at Rahab in the city of Jericho. She was not either. Even when God said, look, total destruction is going to come, total destruction doesn't come, and part of it's through Caleb's hand. God's acceptance or rejection of Canaanites or of Jews or of us today, it's based on faith. Rahab had faith. Caleb had faith. We see these characters who have faith in God's promises, and God accepts them for this. This is something that we need to remember as we look through the Old Testament. But next we see that the promise is interrupted. Sometime after the book of Joshua, the people have come into the land and have conquered most of it, but they haven't completed their job, and this becomes kind of a thorn in their side. And the next book of the Bible is Judges, and Judges follows a typical pattern. The people fall into some kind of false worship, some kind of sin, and because of this, God sends an outside oppressor to oppress them for some time, and then they cry out to God, they repent, and so God sends them a deliverer, and this deliverer comes and expels whoever's oppressing them. And there's a bit of peace for a little while, and then they fall back into their pattern. And this goes on repeat the entire book of Judges. So Gideon is one of these deliverers who was set up to judge over the people. His story opens, the stage is set this way. Judges 6:1 says, the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. So God calls Gideon during this time where the Midianites have come in. The Midianites lived in northern Saudi Arabia, and so they've come up into the land and are oppressing the people. They're taking their produce, and Gideon is in the middle of this. He's hiding in a cellar, and he's threshing his wheat there. He's trying to separate the chaff, and God calls him in this moment. His response, like Caleb's response, showed that he understood God's promises. In Judges 6:13, it says, Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonderful deeds that the fathers recounted us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. Gideon knows the stories, right? He goes, hey, God can do all this stuff, and he hasn't. Have you ever been at that moment in your life where you're like, I know God is able, but why isn't he? Come on, God. I think we probably all have had those moments where, for whatever reason, God's ability to act and his actual acting seem to be separated by a chasm, and we're sitting at the bottom of that. That's where Gideon is right here. Look, I've heard the stories, and you're saying God is with us, but I don't see God with us. What I see are the Midianites with us. Tell me how that works. His first task was to go and destroy the statues of Baal and the Asherah pole that were his father's. The fact that the whole town comes out and reacts in anger makes me think that his family must have been somewhat important in this village or in the tribe here. They come out and they're angry. They know who did it. They come to the dad and say, look, let's do something. And basically the dad's response is, well, whose statue was it? It's Baal's statue. Well, let him do something about it. If it's his statue, let him defend it, if he's so strong. Gideon gathers an army to go and fight against the Midianites, but God thought that the army was too big. It was about 32,000 men. God wanted everyone to know that the victory was his. It wasn't a military victory. It wasn't a superior force-on-force situation. So he had him cut the size of the army down twice. The first thing, he just says, hey, whoever's afraid and wants to go home, now's your chance. At that moment, a significant number of men left, and their rank shrank to 10,000 men. He tested them again by some water. He had them go to drink, and the men who dropped their guard in order to take water, he relieved them of duty. So his army went from 32,000 to 10,000 to 300 men. The battle plan was a rare battle plan for that day. God instructed them to attack at night. They had a trumpet in one hand, and they had a torch and a pot in the other hand covering the torch, and they were to break the pots, show the fire, blow the trumpets, and that was the battle plan. But it all happens at night. Now, what you might not know about tribal cultures, about Bedouin cultures, is they're afraid of the dark. Even in today's world, you can go into tribes around the world, in many continents, many places, and you will find just a generic fear of the dark. being alone in the jungle, that kind of thing. People tell all of these stories about, yeah, so-and-so went in the jungle, and they invent something. There was this spirit that appeared to be like their dead wife or their dead child that said, come on out, and lured them into the jungle, and then we never saw them. These sort of myths surrounding disappearances is just them explaining why is someone gone. But there's a fear of that, right? So in cultures where you don't have, pre-electricity, the lights go out, you come inside, you gather everything in. And so here, everyone is doing that except for these 300 men. They're told, go out and attack at night. The surprise attack has effect of total chaos. The Midianites start fighting each other. They start fleeing. The Midianites were a mobile people. They were nomadic. They had camels. Camels don't like all of this kind of activity. Imagine a spooked horse and now put that thing on 6-foot legs. That's kind of what you have going on. You have these huge beasts running through camp trying to get out of there. That's how God handed them the victory. But towards the end of Gideon's life, he does something strange. Let's look at chapter 8 and verse 22. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And Gideon said to them, let me make a request of you, every one of you, give me the earrings from his spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that was requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in the city of Ophrah. And Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 days. For 40 years in the days of Gideon. So verse 23, he starts off with rejecting this idea of ruling. He says, look, I'm not going to rule. My son's not going to rule. They want a kind of hereditary kingship set up. It would make sense, right? You won this great victory. We're going to make you king, keep us safe forever. And he was right to say this. He was on the right track. But then he does a weird thing. Things go south rather quickly. He says, give me all your gold and your earrings. Do you remember another scene in the Bible where there's a similar request like this? Moses had gone up on the mountain to receive the law, this amazing moment where God has come down. There's all of this amazing imagery around this moment where heaven and earth are meeting and the law is being given, the next covenant is being given. And the people are down there saying, it's kind of scary. We don't know if Moses is coming back down or not. Maybe God just killed him. Maybe he died on the way up. We don't know. But we need something to believe in. And so Aaron says, look, bring me all your gold. Let's make something here. That's what Gideon does. This is reminiscent of the golden calf scene. He's believed God's promises. He's had amazing victories on God's behalf. And at the end of his life, even though he said, look, I won't be king, but give me your gold and let me make something for you. He takes the gold, it's roughly 60 pounds of gold, and he makes an ephod. An ephod's the breastplate that the high priest would wear, had the one stone for each of the 12 tribes of Israel on it. And so he makes one. With that amount of gold, this must have been rather large. It's a religious symbol, and now it's become this kind of false idol. It's removed the Levitical priesthood from its proper place, and it itself becomes an object of worship rather than a garment worn during the worship of God, during the service of God. If you want to know how God felt about it, look at verse 27. He uses a very strong word there. All Israel whored after it, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. No, I won't be king. Yes, I know God's promises. Yes, we did amazing victories together, but let me set up an object of worship for you. The man who's known to get his start by tearing down a false object of worship is the man who creates one at the end of his life. But the story goes on just a little bit. It tells about his death in verse 29. Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives, and his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father at Orpah of the Abiezrites. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. So there's one little name in here that's really fascinating. Gideon says, look, I'm not going to rule over you, and my son's not going to rule over you. But he has a son, and his son's name is Abimelech. The word for father in Hebrew is Ab, okay? So in the New Testament, we know that we can cry out to God, Abba, Father, right? That's that word for dad. Whenever you add an E sound, that I, in our English text, whenever you add that E sound, it makes it mine. So Ab is father, Abi, my father. Okay, that last word, Melech, is king. I won't be king, and my son won't be king. Hey, little Abi, go tell them what your name is. Abimelech, my father, the king. He builds an ephod at the end of his life that becomes an object of worship, and he names his son, my father's king. You know. Where did he go wrong? Gideon understood the stories and the promises. He had witnessed God act in amazing ways, but at the end of his life, he sets up all of this stuff. He kind of choreographs in a small way to set up his lineage as a kind of royal line. If we look at both of these characters and their story arcs together, we see where they both knew God's promises. They both obeyed God. They both did great things for God. They both showed great faith. So why did they finish so differently? By the end of his life, Gideon had taken his eye off of God. He sat back and started enjoying the spoils of war. He started creating things out of the spoils of war. He started making his own religious significance out of this, and eventually this washed him out. The Gideon story is interesting to me because I think it highlights something that's been happening quietly in the church. I don't mean the church Mountain View, I just mean the church. For most of my life, I've heard people, I've read studies about young people leaving the church. All the worry, all the focus has been young people, young millennials, they're not coming to church. All the focus has been there. And I think something's quietly been happening in the background that none of us really noticed quite as obviously until COVID hit. Currently, of all the generations, Gen Z has the most frequent church attendance of any generation from Gen Z all the way to boomers, which is fascinating. So there's actually a reversal in who is going to church and who is not. But since all of the focus has been on young people, no one's been watching what people in their 40s and 50s have been doing. For people in their 40s to 50s, church attendance went from 41% to 28% between 2020 and 2023. In a 3-year window, it dropped significantly. They're currently attending at the same rate that millennials are attending the church. Only millennials didn't drop off, they've just always been at that percentage. That's a fascinating thing to think about. The Arizona Cultural Research Center, they did a study and they took 10 categories, just had questions like, do you believe that God is sovereign? Do you believe the Bible is true? Just some basic kind of a litmus test of Christian theology. And they rank the various generations and how they changed between 2020 and 2023. Practices like daily Bible reading dropped off by 10% among those in the 40 to 57 range. Beliefs like having God as the ruler of the world, or confession of sins on a regular basis, or thankfulness or praise outside of a worship service fell by a similar percentage point. The explanations are diverse as to why this is the case. People in that life phase are busy with life. They're raising children, some of them are taking care of parents, some are doing both at the same time. Sometimes they have too many extracurricular activities, and church can just feel like one more extracurricular. I think the issue is deeper, though. I don't have data to back up what I'm about to say. This is just my opinion, so take it for that. I think sometimes the message hasn't really taken root. Think of the life cycle of any person, right? If you have parents who are Christian and they bring you to church, your experience in life is, well, I grew up in church. And then you hit kind of teenage years and you start experimenting with how do you want to live your life? What do you want to kind of dabble in and tinker with? And typically there's a kind of experimental phase, a walking away phase, if you will. Sometimes goes into college where it becomes more pronounced, and that's when parents notice like, oh my gosh, my kid doesn't go to church anymore. Well, they hadn't really gone for a long time. You just hadn't noticed because they were physically present, but not there. So they go and they have fun at college. They kind of do their own thing. They're not in church. They're not with a group of fellow Christian believers. They're not growing in their faith. And then they get married, and then they have kids. And so there's this memory that pops up going, well, I want to be a good parent. And so what I need to do, my parents brought me to church, and I guess I turned out okay. So I want my kids to have a good moral life. Apparently I got that at church. And so I'm going to bring my kids to church because that's what they need. They need to go to church so that they can have that same kind of experience. Well, what happens when those kids grow up and go to college and move away from home? Right? That would put that group in, say, the late 40s, early mid-50 range. If it never became their own faith, they simply walk back away. Right? If the gospel never took root, if they were never a true disciple, there's nothing keeping them there. Look, this is the question that keeps me up at night. I'm being 100% honest here. I have to think to myself, hey, when my kids are gone, am I going to care so much about this in the home? Hey, if I wasn't a pastor, would I be going this deep in God's word? Is this really real to me, or is it just sort of an occupational hazard because I have a Christian job? I ask these questions all the time. Every time I see a pastor crash and burn out, I'm not looking at judgment. I'm looking introspectively going, man, am I walking down that same road and just don't know it? These are real questions for me. They should be real questions for you. If you're in that 40 to 57 range, these should be real questions for you. How real is the faith for you? Are you setting yourself up like a Gideon? Right? To have gone and kind of dabbled in the faith, to have seen amazing things that God has done, to know his promises up here, and then by the end of your life to realize it never actually took root. It was all symbolic. It was all ritual. It was just a schedule. It was a parenting strategy. That's what should keep us up at night. Where are we? I noticed this during COVID when people just a little bit older than me just kind of took this sort of like, well, I guess I'm just not going to go to church anymore kind of phase. Look, church attendance as a thing is not what I'm on about. It's this idea that where is your discipleship happening? Where is your Christian community happening? Right? It doesn't have to happen in a structural, nonprofit, above ground, meets on every Sunday kind of church. There's other ways for that to happen. But it has, as a believer, there's no option that doesn't happen. And so to completely remove yourself, to have no care about that at all, should make us ask serious, serious questions. Are you just here because of tradition? Are you just here to set a good example for your kids? When people walk away during COVID and don't come back, it's not for us to judge, but it is a time to look introspectively and say, how real is this to me on a personal level? So what does all of this mean for us? Since we probably aren't going to repel invaders anytime soon or invade a land and kick out the inhabitants, what does this mean for us? And what on earth does any of this have to do with retirement? Number one, finishing strong means living in obedience to God's promises. We can trust that God will accomplish his will. And if we can align our lives with his will, we know, well, God is going to accomplish this. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not very helpful retirement advice, right? Like where in the Bible is the promise about healthy 401k and wise saving practices? Where in the Bible does it talk about retirement home or a second home or having an RV, traveling, a life at ease, all the things that we dream about that our culture programs us to want, kind of like the game of life last week, right? There's all these things that we're supposed to have, all these boxes we're supposed to check. And that advice is supposed to help us sustain that quality of life, that level of comfort into our older years. You're right, those promises aren't there. In fact, sometimes the sort of disunity between our hopes and dream and what God says his promises are sometimes feel like miles apart. These are the promises from our culture to keep us plugged into the system. God's promises relate not only to this life, but they relate to the life to come. For both Gideon and Caleb, they knew God's promises and they trusted his work. If you're going to live a life of faithfulness, it's going to be God that is going to do this work in you. And you have to believe and follow. Number 2 is finishing strong means recalibrating our goals with God's will. Right? We know his will from the Bible. This is the starting point for us, is he tells us so many things about how he wants us to live. We have to reject the cultural narrative that takes its cue from the game of life. The winner isn't the one with the most toys or the biggest house or the most cash, the best vacations, the most experiences. The winner in God's kingdom is the one who is faithful till the end, the one who serves the most, the one who is last, not first. This might not be practical retirement advice, but what good is climbing up the ladder and doing it better than everybody else, only at the end to realize it's on the wrong wall? In our retirement survey, people's biggest worries shifted from financial worries for those who were yet to retire to worries about purpose for those who are currently retired. You see, filling our lives with hobbies and experiences and pleasure and comfort is not what God made us for. We might have these things as, we might receive some of these things as part of our pursuit of him, but we can't buy into a counterfeit promise from the world and then expect this to be fulfilling in the end when our God-given purpose has not been nurtured all along. We have to reconnect with our God-given purpose, right? You might die in poverty. You might die a millionaire. None of us know how our life will turn out. I mean, during economic, up and downs, we see where people's whole future is kind of swung in the balance as, a stock market crashes or as a company goes under or as a pandemic hits. I mean, huge fears and worries. But we don't know how those things will sort out. But we can trust God's promises in our life, both how they relate to our life now and how they relate to the life to come. Finally, finishing strong means not quitting. This is where the word sustainment rather than retirement is important, particularly as it relates to our faith. We're called to always be faithful and obedient. There's not a retirement system to the faith where I put in X many years of serving God and obeying him and following his word and showing up, and then I can take the next, 10, 15, 20, 30, however many I get after that, and just kind of sit back and say, well, it's the next generation's time to do this. That's not how it works. There's a purpose, even in our later years, to serve God and to serve others, to bring his blessing to everyone. There's a work for us to do still. It doesn't matter how well you've lived your life if you sacrifice your principles at the end. You can put in your time being the good parent, taking your kid to all the things, making sure they get the college education and the moral training from church and all of these things. If you just, at the end of the time, go, well, that was a good phase. I guess I'm done with that now. It doesn't have any value if that is how you're thinking about it. It has to take root. It has to give you life right now. So if you're currently retired, you have to be thinking about, okay, how do I make sure that the promises and the hopes that I'm believing in right now are actually God's promises and God's hopes for my life? How do I align with that? How do I make sure that I'm not kind of jettisoning his work, his will, his word in my life so that I can just pursue more or so that I can maintain what I have until the end? If you're like me and you're not yet retired, it's kind of just the opposite side of that equation. What am I building into my life right now so that my walk with God is mine? It's not because my parents took me to church, and it's not because I'm now the parent making sure that my kids go to church. How do I make sure that the promises of God are real promises to me that I am living out, that I am orienting my whole life around? That's something that we have to think about right now before retirement. Let's pray together. Lord, when we think about your promises and we look through these various stories, it's easy to feel what the people of Israel felt after the bad report came in. It's easy to look at the stats. It's easy to look at the number and inflation and where things are going and just say, it's too big, it's too scary, this doesn't make sense. It's easy to shelve your promises, to focus on the technical side of making all of that work. God, we pray for more faith. We pray that you would strengthen our faith, that it would take a deep root in our life, that it would take a transforming effect in our life. That this wouldn't be something that we waited until our hour of need to start talking to you, but that would be something that we do every day and in every way right now, Lord. Increase our faith so that we know that your promises are ultimate. We know that you will accomplish your promise. We know that your promise trumps whatever vision that the world has given us about how our life should be, what we deserve, that we'd be trusting your promise more than that. Lord, you take care of all of our needs. This is what you say again and again through the Gospels. You take care of the grass in the fields and the flowers and the birds of the air. How much more do you take care of us? You give us what we need, Lord. Let us stop worrying about those things and let us fixate on your promises, Lord. We ask this in your name. Amen.